President Trump scrapped his talking points at a tax event in West Virginia on Thursday, focusing on other topics instead. Mr. Trump spent most of the event discussing immigration and trade. The president said he is looking to send 2,000 to 4,000 National Guard troops to the border. He also commented on U.S. trade with China. Kevin Cirilli is chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg, joining me from Washington now. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So President Trump's comments on immigration came one day after he ordered the National Guard to the southern border. Even though this event was ostensibly billed as a tax roundtable, he literally threw out the script. Why is the president, Kevin, so focused on illegal immigration now?
Well, he can't get a deal with Democrats on DACA. When you talk to Republicans, this is a president who has said consistently that he wanted to get something done through Congress to bolster security along the U.S.-Mexico border, but also to reach some type of deal for Dreamers on DACA. That's a pipe dream now. And so the reality has set in for this administration that in order to get something done on immigration, the type of rhetoric that he campaigned on, he's going to have to go it alone. And that leaves him with limited ability to get things through the executive, through the power of the pen. And that includes deploying some of the National Guard troops to the border. Look, this plays well to the base of the Trump movement, but whether or not it helps moderates and independents to vote Republican in midterm elections, that's a risky gamble. And when you talk to someone in leadership's office, I would just point to what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told Kentucky Today, a local Kentucky affiliate, his state where he governs, earlier this week, which was they think that there's a blue hurricane coming in November, and it's just a matter of how big that hurricane's going to be, a hurricane 2, 3, or 4. That's the majority leader's comment, Stephanie. So all of this now does have consequences.
We are getting some late-breaking news that the president is asking his trade representative to consider an additional $100 billion in tariffs on China. This would be in addition to the tariffs that have already been announced, apparently a way to retaliate against China's retaliation. How might this escalate what I think investors tomorrow certainly are going to worry is heading toward a trade war?
Well, Stephanie, investors are certainly jittery over this, to say the least. And so are folks in the Midwestern part of the country. That's why you have people like Senators Joni Ernst and Chuck Grassley, two Republicans from Iowa, big soybean population and agricultural population in the Iowa state, who are urging the president to reconsider. So it's not just Wall Street, it's farmers as well. Earlier today, I spoke with Larry Kudlow, the president's chief economic advisor at the White House, and he told me essentially, you know, this is just rhetoric right now. Nothing has been implemented. So there are some within the administration, like Larry Kudlow, who argue, Stephanie, that this is a negotiation tactic, that nothing has been actually implemented, and that this is going to take months-long process. But to folks outside of Washington who are just residing or just going off of the signals coming from President Trump and his administration, this is another signal that, yes, they're trying to get the Chinese to the drawing board, but, you know, I mean, this has real repercussions, not just on Wall Street, but to farmers as well.
Absolutely. As we mentioned, the West Virginia event was supposed to be about taxes, and President Trump, and that's ostensibly a good news story for the president. But he criticized, of course, during the part where he did talk about taxes, he criticized West Virginia's Democratic Senator Joe Manchin for voting against the GOP tax bill. Manchin is up for re-election. Did Trump's remarks indicate to you that the president is looking ahead to the midterm elections, that this is going to be one of the main talking points for Republicans?
Well, you got to remember, it was just a couple of weeks ago or months ago when President Trump, when the Republicans were all gathered there, and President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence were there in West Virginia for the Republican retreat. And so they really view this as a battleground for Senator Joe Manchin, who we should note is a centrist Democrat, the type of Democrat who they try to pick off when there's a bipartisan bill that comes up. Look, you're absolutely right. You would think that the tax bill would be something that they would want to really push out, really talk about. But immigration was something that the president was off script and went with. I've covered so many Trump rallies back on the campaign trail. It's like it was deja vu a little bit. The bottom line, though, you know, I'll go back to what Larry Kudlow told me earlier today at the White House, which was, I said, what's the end goal? Because that's what I hear from a lot of folks on Wall Street. What is the end goal for the U.S.-China trade relationship? And he said point blank, it's growth. And that they're going to be, in the weeks to come, launching some type of what he called a global coalition of the willing, trying to rally other countries to get on board with this, because they believe that China has taken advantage of the United States on trade for quite some time and that it can't get much worse. China, though, is saying game on.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's interesting. With your conversation with Kudlow, I think there's a lot of consensus on both sides of the aisle that as far as intellectual property theft goes, that is going on and something needs to be done. It's interesting to hear Kudlow, though, now say that tariffs should be on the table when he's been against that all along. But I want to get you on another topic, which is this stuff happening at the Environmental Protection Agency, and the administration's administrator, Scott Pruitt, is under intense scrutiny. He is, in fact, Kevin, facing 3 separate audits from the department's inspector general. And those audits, they don't even include that apartment that he rented from an energy lobbyist's wife at a below market rate. What do you think? Will the president ultimately decide to remove Pruitt?
It's not a good look. I mean, this is a candidate who ran on draining the swamp. There have been Republicans, Mia Love, a congresswoman, a prominent congresswoman in the Republican Party, calling for him to resign. But there are also folks who are standing by him, and that's where this gets interesting. Secretary Pruitt is someone who is aligned with a Republican megadonor, Harold Hamm, who, of course, is a prominent funder, if not the most significant funder, to the most significant pro-Trump super PAC. He is aligned with Secretary Pruitt. On the flip side of that, earlier today, Stephanie, we saw the likes of Senators Ted Cruz and Rand Paul calling for him to stay. Now, there's been mixed messages coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But what is different this time are 2 things. These are the big takeaways. First and foremost, that every time you've seen the revolving door spin faster, or who's in, who's out, there hasn't been that much of a coalition behind someone like we've seen. So there is a full force Republican effort behind the scenes to keep him. They're divided, but there's still that effort. But the second point is, this gets back to what we were just talking about. The appointee process. Do you really think Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants to have to go through another Senate confirmation right before the midterms? I mean, this is just another headache for them. So this is a political problem. This is a policy problem for folks who are in line with President Trump's agenda, and it's one that has stuck around and is not going away.
Yeah, they've got Veterans Affairs, they've got State, they've got CIA, they've got plenty of
Secretary Carson?
Yeah. Carson, plenty on the Senate's plate as far as confirmations. Kevin Cirilli, good stuff. Thank you so much for all those insights.